Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Hope you are doing well. In this module, we are going to be getting started with how to implement ScrollViews in SwiftUI. So just to give you guys a quick overview of what that is, I'm going to bring this threads clone back up here. And we can see here that on my home feed, as you might expect, this is a scrollable list of items, as is my user list. I can scroll through this list of items here. And same thing with like this activity list right here, right? So we're going to be going over how to implement this functionality with SwiftUI here. It's actually going to be really simple. And we're also going to be continuing our use with loops to help us do this. And it's going to be really fun, guys. So let me just show you what we're going to be building before we get started. We are going to build out this incredible looking UberEats style menu. So you guys might be shocked that you're going to be able to put something this beautiful together at this point in your development career, but SwiftUI makes it that easy. So we're going to be going over how to implement this inside of a scrollable list with ScrollView. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. So as always, we're going to start this off by creating a new module. So we're going to say ScrollViews, drag that down, and create a new SwiftUI view, ScrollViews module. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it, guys. So I just want to go over how to implement a super basic scroll view to get started. And we're going to go over how to implement them both vertically and horizontally. So what I want us to do is go ahead and create a VStack and a for each loop. And let's loop through 0 to 100 and add our ID property, \self, index in. And then let's just add text, hello, index. So you guys can see here that this is really ugly, right? Like we are starting on our screen at 31 and it stops at 70, but we want to display hello 0 through 100, right? So if you actually look at the content of this, right, like the frame, you guys will see this expands far off the screen, right? So what we want to do is implement a scroll view here, so all of this gets contained within the frame of the screen or the phone, and then we can scroll up and down to view all of the content. So to do that, guys, it is super simple. All you need to do is highlight this code, hit Command X to cut it, and add this scroll view, and then paste it in there. And guess what? Now we have this beautiful scrollable list. Just go ahead and hit play back on the simulator, or sorry, the preview here, and you guys will notice that I can scroll up and down now, which is absolutely incredible. SwiftUI makes it that easy to implement a scrollable list. So there's a couple things that we're going to want to adjust here, however, or some customization that I want to go over with you guys. So you'll notice that right now this is a vertically scrollable list and it has this indicator here. Well, there are going to be times where you want to show that indicator and where you might not want to show that indicator. So we can open up our parentheses here, and we see a couple different input parameters, right? We already have our content, so don't worry about that. We want to use this guy that says shows indicator, and we can say false, and you guys will notice that now nothing is showing up on that with that scrolling indicator, right? So sometimes you guys might want that, you might not. It defaults to true. So if you want to disable that, you just have to add this input parameter to hide that indicator for your scrolling. And you know, one more time, what it looks like with it, we can see that indicator right there, right? So, okay, guys, that is a vertically scrollable list. How do we introduce a horizontal scrollable list? So you might think that, hey, we just go here and make this an H stack, but that's not necessarily the case, right? So what we're going to have to do is actually modify the axis of the scroll view. So we can go here and say axis, or actually, guys, we can actually just say dot horizontal. And you guys will notice that I now have a horizontally scrollable list. So scroll views default to vertical on the axis, and then you typically just implement a VStack and some sort of loop to loop through a bunch of items to have your scrollable list there, right? If you want the horizontal axis, you just specify that in your input parameters here, and you make an H stack, and you can do the same exact thing. So here, you know, we can maybe make like a rectangle dot frame width and height of maybe like 100 by 100, and let's just maybe get like 10 of them. And you guys can see here that I have this like sort of horizontally scrollable list. We could even have a little bit more fun with this and implement something like the stories user interface that you might see on Instagram or something, right? So let's see if we can just do that for funsies, guys. And then we will move on to building out this scrollable UberEats menu here. So let's create an array that we can loop through of all of our drivers. So we're going to loop through all of those driver images and then display them in like a horizontally scrollable list here. Something that is going to, like I said before, mimic like the stories feature on Instagram. So let's go and say, let driver images equal, and let's just go ahead and type this out. I'll kind of speed through this. Okay, so I have my driver images. You guys can use whatever set of images you like. And what we're going to do is loop through this driver images array. We'll say image in. And let's just go ahead and create an image, guys, with our image name. Say .resizable. And then we're going to say .frame width and height of, let's do like 64 by 64. .clip shape is a circle. And you guys will notice that it's that simple to put together a user interface that looks like super amazing, just like we see with the stories feature on something like Instagram, right? So really, really awesome functionality that SwiftUI gives us there, guys. They really make putting these user interfaces together so easy. And once you get the hang of this stuff, it's as easy as breathing. So now what I want us to do is move on to creating this awesome UberEats menu here. So this is going to be a scrollable list of like these menu items. So let's go ahead and get started with that, guys. So I have added these images in my assets folder that we're going to be using. We have like this Japanese tapas guy, pizza, ramen, steak, sushi, and burgers. So that's what we're going to be using for this, guys. You should have access to that in the completed source code file. And you guys can drag and drop this into your own project as well. And let's go ahead and get started with this. So I'm going to comment this whole thing out, and we're going to create a new scroll view. So we're just going to say scroll view, and just like that. So let me actually pull this image up for reference so that we can see what we're going to be building. So it's going to look like this. Let me just make it a little smaller. Okay. So we're going to have this featured on UberEats text first, and then our scrollable list, guys. So we're going to say text featured on UberEats. And then we're going to say .font is .title2. I know I didn't do a super deep dive into all the fonts, guys. So really quickly, you have title, title2, title3. Then you have like headline and subheadline. If you guys want to see more of the fonts that are available, you can hold down the command button and click on that title3 guy and say jump to definition. And it will take you to like the actual SwiftUI code. And these are all of the fonts that you have available right here. Large title, title, title2, headline, body, call out, footnote, and caption. And they are organized from largest to smallest here. So that's just a list of all the fonts you have available to you. So we're going to do title 2. We're going to say .font weight is .semi-bold. And we are going to give this some padding. So we want some padding all around this guy, as we can sort of see here, right? We have padding on the leading edge, on the top, and before we start our scroll view. Okay, so next up, guys, we are going to need our food image names. So I'm going to say let food images equal. And once again, just going to type this out super fast. It's going to be Japanese tapas. Okay, so those are all of our food images. So pretty similar to what we did here, guys. We're just going to create our for each loop. We're going to go through our food images, say ID \self. Food image in. And then we are going to start creating this item that we see here. So we're going to have this image, and then underneath it, we're going to have some information about the restaurant and the delivery time. So let's get started with the image, right? So we are going to just create an image here. and we have access to our image name. So we're going to say food image. Okay. And then we are going to say dot resizable. We're going to say dot scaled to fill. So we can already see this sort of coming together. We just need to adjust the frame. So then we're going to say dot frame width and height is 360 by 150. And then we need to say dot corner radius is 10. And that looks pretty good to me. So we have all of our images here and they look pretty good. So next up, guys, we want to add our text. So unfortunately, the text is going to be the same for each thing. Right now, we only have the ability or the knowledge to loop through one data structure. We are going to go over how to add dynamic data to each individual item in a future video. For now, the only thing that's going to vary between these list items is the food image. So we're just going to go here and we're going to say text shoto text $0.99 delivery 15 to 30 minutes. And we want the foreground color of that to be dot gray. And that looks pretty good. Okay. So there are some things we need to adjust, right? We definitely want the font size to be smaller here. Let me just make this bigger. Right, so this is the completed app. We want this one aligned to the leading edge. We want to bold the restaurant name, and then we want the font size to be a little bit smaller here. And then we're also going to want some spacing between each item. So let's see if we can do that. So here, let's go ahead and wrap this text, these two text components in its own VStack, guys. And then we are going to paste that in there. And we are going to go here and we're going to say we want the alignment to be dot leading. So that gets Shoto over to the leading edge of this VStack, right? So that's a cool trick there. Anytime you guys have vertically stacked things and you want them to have their own unique behavior, you can just create a substack, right? So we created a substack for just our two text components, which is its own VStack, and we set the alignment to leading. So only these things will be aligned to the leading edge here. So that looks good. And then, guys, a nice trick that you can do, instead of saying dot font, dot subheadline, dot font, dot subheadline in both places, right? Because that's the font that we want. What you can do is actually just extract that font guy and put it on the entire VStack. And what it'll do is it'll apply that font to each individual sub element or sub component in that particular stack. So we don't have to put that in multiple places, which is really, really nice. The only thing we want to do is bold Shoto. So we're going to say dot font weight, dot semi bold for the restaurant name. And that looks pretty good. So you guys will notice that while we accomplished getting Shoto over to the left side of this VStack, it's still not all the way aligned to this leading edge here of our overall like menu item, right? So what we can do is wrap all of this in its own VStack, paste it in there, and we can actually say alignment is not leading on this guy. And that'll move it all the way over very, very nicely, right? And then we can actually delete that property here. I think, no, we cannot. So it has to be in both places. So this gives you guys a really good example of what or how this stuff works, right? So not only do we have to put the alignment as leading on this VStack, we also have to put it on this VStack, because if we take it out here, although this whole VStack is aligned to the leading edge, this substack is not, right? So then we can paste that back in there. And you guys might be thinking, okay, well, maybe we don't need this VStack at all. I could just place it within the overall VStack and that would do the same thing. And you wouldn't be wrong in saying that, right? But the nice thing about having these two text components in its own VStack is that we can control the spacing between these two things as we see fit. So I can apply custom spacing. So maybe like 12 pixels, 4 pixels, right, to this text component that won't affect the overall VStack, right? So let me show you what I mean by that. So now if I want spacing between the text, or sorry, the image and this text, then I could apply spacing to this guy, like 32, just to give you guys a really good idea of what's going on. So this shows you how you can apply like more custom spacing between elements in a nested stack, guys. I know this might be starting to get confusing, but if you really stop and break it down and think about it, it's not that bad. So what really helps me is looking at the frame of things, right? So selecting that little arrow guy down there. So this whole thing represents this VStack. You see it highlights the code for us in the editor. So if you ever get confused, you can just do that, right? So if I select this entire VStack, it highlights the code that represents that item. So right now I applied a spacing of 32, but if I were to take this stuff out and just put it in this big VStack, it would be 32 pixels of spacing between each item in the VStack, right? Which looks really ugly. So if I wanted to have custom spacing between just these two elements, that's when placing it inside of its own VStack or substack comes in handy, right? Because now I can have custom spacing here and custom spacing between these two things. So now we've sort of chunked these two things together and this thing together in one stack. So now when we apply spacing, it'll treat this as just one big chunk of things. And then within this guy, we can apply our own custom spacing to that. Obviously, we don't want 32 pixels of spacing there. That was really just to show you guys how that stuff works. I think that looks just fine. And the 4 pixels of spacing looks good there as well. What I do want us to do though, guys, is, this is looking really good. And if you go and hit play, you'll notice that you can scroll through these items. I do want to customize this a little bit further though. So like now let's go one step back and think about how we can apply spacing between each one of our menu items. So we just looked at how to apply spacing in each individual menu item, but what if we want to now apply spacing between all of our menu items in this overall list, right? So what I can do there is wrap this for each loop inside of its own VStack. So let's just cut all that stuff. VStack. And now I can add spacing here. And I can say like 24 pixels. And you guys will notice that it now applies spacing between each item. So like if I said 64, just to get this really pronounced, you guys could see what that does there, right? So that just gives you guys an idea of how you can really like extract things into their own stacks to control the spacing between items. And once again, that's a much better option than just applying padding everywhere. So an alternative would have been to, let's take this for each loop and replace it right here. You could have, right, gone here and said .padding .vertical or something like that. And that'll give you some spacing between each one of your items the same way it would if we wrapped the whole thing in a VStack. And that's not necessarily wrong. I just prefer to use the spacing component on stacks, guys. And wrapping things in stacks to me makes a little bit more sense than just putting padding in random places. So let me go ahead and remove this. And let's go ahead and put this for each loop back in its own VStack and say spacing is 24. Right? Because now as a developer, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, this thing is its own VStack and it has 24 pixels of spacing between each item. And then each item inside of the for loop is like this menu item and all that stuff. So I just think that's a little bit more organized, right? So let's resume our preview and it looks really good. One more trick I want to show you guys before we end this video is what if we want this featured on UberEats guide to be like sticky, right? Like what if we don't want that to scroll with the menu? Well, here's how we can do that. We are once again going to back all this stuff out into a VStack. So a quicker way to do that, guys, is you can just command click on this scroll view guy and make sure the canvas is open when you do this, or this option won't come up. And you can hit embed in VStack, and it automatically embeds all that stuff in a VStack for you. And what we're going to do is move this text outside of the scroll view. And now you'll notice that it's sort of like a sticky header, right? Which is super cool. So there might be some instances in which you guys want the whole thing to scroll, or you might want some instances where the header behaves as sort of a sticky header. And if we want to really finish out this UI and get this showing up on the left side of the screen, guys, we can just go ahead and add an alignment of dot leading to this VStack. And guess what? That'll show up on the left side of the screen there. So, and that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. We just put together that incredible user interface that looks almost exactly like UberEats with less than like 50 lines of code, which is just absolutely incredible. So this is really starting to showcase the power of SwiftUI. And I know this stuff might be a little bit daunting right now, but I keep telling you guys, the more practice you get, the easier this is going to get. You're really starting to build a solid foundation, whether you realize it or not, because we are combining a lot of concepts that we have learned previously in the course to put things like this together. Stacks and texts and frames and clip shapes and all of that stuff, right? So you guys are getting better by the module. In the next one, we are going to be continuing on with grids in SwiftUI. So that's going to be super exciting, guys. We will see you there. Peace out.